Good afternoon and welcome to the second day of Network Fest. I hope wherever you are, you've been having Network Fest parties, they're bunting out in the street, you've been gathering with your neighbours to sit around and watch this set of webinars all about the very best in learning networks from across the country, from across the globe. My name is Richard. I work here at Glasgow, and it's fantastic to have you with us today. We've got half an hour to discuss, I think, a really important topic, which we'll talk about in just a second. But I'm Richard.
I'm Danny Ryan.
And I'm Anna Howells.
And welcome back if you joined yesterday's webinar. We're running webinars all this week at 12 o'clock. Please do sign up to the others this week if you're yet to do so. And what we've tried to do is find some really important topics which sort of resonated with quite a few people when we were talking to them about Network Fest, about some of the practical problems which occasionally bedevil networks and how you can overcome them. We're going to be talking about a range of things. We've got a fantastic expert joining us, but the whole point of Network Fest is about this debate and involving you as much as us here. So Anna, how can people get involved today?
Sure. So there's two ways that you can join us today, either via Twitter using the hashtag NetworkFest. Our Twitter handle is @KScopeHealth, or via the chat facility, which is in front of you on your screens. And just to say, we are recording this webinar, so it will be available to watch afterwards, along with our 90-second summary video.
Thank you very much indeed. I don't know if Austin is joining us today. Austin, if you are, I hope that all of us are the right way up, unlike yesterday when you sort of seemed to think that we were coming from Australia. We're not. We're here at Glasgow HQ on a sort of fairly bright but smoggy day in southeast London. Danny, what are we talking about today?
Well, yesterday we had the lovely Set and Lisa talking about how to manage a network. So today we're moving on to nobody in my network seems to care. What should I do? Or what can you do about this problem with engagement? If they're not responding to emails, not watching webinars, not coming to your events, how can you deal with that situation? So last week we caught up with Jocelyn Cornwell, who's CEO and Director of the Point of Care Foundation. We asked her some of these pertinent questions around engagement. But why is it an important question, Richard?
No, Danny, great question. So we thought this was a really good topic to discuss because that disengagement, I think if you've ever been involved in a network, I'm assuming lots of people have, it's probably something you'll have experienced at some kind. It's one of those really common network issues, but it's not always obvious what you do and how you get people more engaged in your network. And actually, when a bit of disengagement isn't such a sort of a terminal issue. So we thought it'd be really good just actually to talk about some of those very practical ways you can overcome it.
Brilliant. Should we roll the film?
Let's roll the film.
I'm Jocelyn Cornwell. I'm the founder and the chief executive of the Point of Care Foundation, which is a small charity based in London. We work nationally in the UK and in Ireland. And we run a couple of networks currently. We run a network for heads of patient experience in healthcare. And we also run a network for the Schwartz community, the community of organisations that do Schwartz rounds. I think if no one really cares about the network, you may as well pack up. I think it's very problematic if no one cares. And yet I would say, why bother? But I think the idea that nobody cares needs to be explored. And you really need to understand what lies behind that before you decide to close the network. So in order to work out whether it is indeed true that nobody cares, I think I'd want to be really sure that I had a good definition of the purpose of the network. I'd want a very good understanding of what the members actually want out of it and what they need from it, and whether the purpose matches those things. I'd want to, if the network's been running for a while, I'd want a good understanding of how those needs might have changed, and a good sense of the history of it and the point in the life cycle, if you like, that it might have reached. So I think networks have a natural life cycle, and they're not going to be, everybody's not going to be fully engaged all of the time. There's going to be a drop-off at certain times. So the question is it one of those sort of slumps, or is it terminal? I think a lack of engagement, if that's what's really going on, could stem from a whole variety of things. The first and possibly the most positive is that the network might have fulfilled its purpose. And it's possible, and I suspect likely, that most networks are time limited. So it's come to its natural end. And I think it's worth thinking about how long do you want people to be involved? How long do you expect this network to last when you set it up? I'm not sure any of us really think enough about that at the beginning. So there's a whole variety of things, as I say, about why people might not be engaged. It could be that the members no longer feel the need for it because their circumstances have changed, or their needs are being met in some other way. It could be that their experience is that the network isn't providing what they need. It's just not worth it for them. Doesn't add enough value to them. So it could be that the purpose and the format of it needs to be refreshed. It could just be that they're overwhelmed by the day-to-day activities that they have going on and they don't have time, but they intend to come back. And it could be something about the way the network is operating. You know, what it's offering to them isn't in the right way or in the right quantity, and all of those things you could probably do something about. Possibly. Yes, and I think that probably what I've said already is, I mean, I think it's perfectly possible that networks should end. I don't think they're worth maintaining just for their own sake at all. But it could just be that it needs to be refreshed in some way. Then you need to revisit the purpose of it and check that out with the members. And you need to check out with them whether what you're doing is the right thing done in the right way for them. Or it just could be that it's time to hold fast and just live through this slump and expect it to come back. I think it'd be really useful to know more about the life cycles of networks, actually. My experience is that they take quite a while to grow, and then you have a period of intense activity, and then it falls away, and sometimes you can rebuild that. The other thing I think is worth saying is that not everybody has to be very engaged to get something out of the network. You can belong to a network in a fairly passive way or a sort of lurking way and still be getting what you need from it. And if you're running a network, I think you want everybody to be really active, but what you want has got nothing to do with what they need. Okay, my top 3 things. Number 1 is have a really clear purpose that chimes with the membership, that you know it's something they need. Number 2 is involve the members in designing and delivering what the network offers. And number 3 is staying close to them, using formal methods like surveys and just getting to know them, getting to know the people and spending time with them.
That was Jocelyn Cornwell there. Jocelyn couldn't be with us today, but I think some really important insights around engagement. So what we'd like to do now is we've got about 20 minutes for sharing, debate, discussion. It's like a mini network all in its own. So please do. Anna, how can people get involved?
So either via Twitter using @KScopeHealth or #NetworkFest, or via the chat facility that's in front of you.
Excellent, thank you very much. Please do get involved. But I think while we're just waiting for comments, feedback, views, and Danny, I think there was a particular issue you were sort of experiencing one of your networks.
Yes, yeah. So for those who don't know, my background's actually as a clinician. I'm a trauma and orthopaedic registrar.
You're not normally wearing sort of a shirt and nice wear trousers, and no
well,
shoes.
The plastic goes on them, so I tend not to wear this kind of trousers.
Okay.
But I've been involved in several sort of national and international networks with other registrars. And particularly with our national network, we had around 1,000 members. But what we found was we would send out communications throughout the year and run a couple of events. But our big annual event, we wanted to see a lot of people there. And only about 100 people would come every year. Didn't matter what we did, where we held it, what sort of talks we were on, what sessions, we would get those same 100. So is it better to have 100 people, 10% of your network well engaged, or is there a better way to engage the other 900 or to empower those 100 to share that value?
Yeah. A really interesting case study. Welcome views, Twitter on chat. I suppose what I really liked about Jocelyn's view on this is actually disengagement could come from so many different reasons. But the thing which I think come back to time and time again is that thing about purpose. And actually, what's your network trying to do, and how much ownership do the people you've got, your members, actually feel over that purpose? And it might work. Firstly, that 1,000 people is a huge network, and getting 100 people along the event every year is pretty decent, I think, sort of pats up on the back. But it might be that the purpose of that network was only really owned by those 100, and the other 900 didn't really buy into it, which is why they weren't engaged. I suppose the point Jocelyn makes is how much does that level of disengagement matter? And actually, if it's a network about deliberately trying to spread ideas and learning beyond just quite a small group, then probably it does actually matter that you've got the same people coming back time and time again. It sounds a bit like people might be going primarily to meet up with their mates, which again, it's a good thing for networks to do, but it may not be meeting that purpose. So I suppose that's why I'd start with purpose. But the other point, just to go back actually a bit to the conversation we had yesterday with Lisa and Suzette, is about that fine line between leadership and management. And Jocelyn made that lovely point about you as the sort of the managers of the network could have a very clear idea about what that network's there to do. But in a way, it doesn't really matter sort of what you think if none of your members do. So how you have a network which is led, as we talk about at Kaleidoscope, from the community rather than from the people who send out the emails. Really tricky balance. If you want to watch back yesterday's webinar for practical tips on that, please do. But those are two thoughts which immediately occur to me.
Okay, I can see some questions popping up on there now in the chat. So, but if I may just first to say, how easy is it for a network to change its purpose? Because people remember, and what happens with that, almost not faith or belief, I suppose, that the understanding of what that purpose is, and if it then changes, does that undermine the network?
Yeah. So I was having this conversation with a friend recently about how you can often sort of talk about life cycle of a network, and I think the point Jocelyn made that actually a network might cease to exist, but the purpose will pop up somewhere else, and there might be a new network. So the typical purpose of a really vibrant network is something which is an issue today, but it's going to be an issue in 5, 10, 100 years' time. How do you deliver really high quality care for a particular population? It's a purpose which is going to be there. So I think the challenge to networks is, are they flexible enough and in touch with their members enough to be able to have that sort of conversation, which is, I think probably we need to change our purpose, or does that network die away and another one pop up? It's probably worth saying that sort of the life course, that concept of a life course for network, is we're talking about at Friday's webinar, Anna? Yes. Who's joining us on Friday?
So Professor Becky Mulvey is joining us on Friday for that webinar.
And I think that would be a really interesting one to come back onto.
Okay, great. Should we go to some of the questions from the chat if there's some themes coming out now?
Did you get what you needed?
I did, thank you. I did, that's fantastic, thank you.
Cool. So a few different themes coming across the questions, so thanks very much for those, and do keep them coming. The first question that we have was from John, so thank you, John. He asks, if networks have a natural life cycle, does this exclude the possibility of an involved network? Coming back to it.
Danny, what do you think?
Sorry, can you
repeat the question? Sure. So if networks have a natural life cycle, does this exclude the possibility of an involved network?
Well, I don't think it does, because this is what we're talking about here with the flexibility, isn't it? So if it's always responsive, to the members of that network,
Yeah.
then it's going to naturally change over time. You know, it's not going to, you may not even need to necessarily have a strong conversation about, well, I think, you know, to pick on what Jocelyn said, you may as well pack up. I don't think that's right at all. You know, and it does also beg the question, actually, does a network ever die if its purpose changes? Is it a different network? No, it's just an evolution. I don't know, Richard, do you agree?
Yeah. So it's so one of the things which we've been thinking about as Kaleidoscope, and part of our role here is to support others running networks, is how actually you sort of bake into a network design that regular questioning of the value a network gives and why it's there. And I think quite often when we set up a network, we think of it a bit like setting up an organisation. That great, we'll build this organisation and then it will be there forever. In NHS speak, that means about 2 years. Rather than thinking, actually, you know, we'll go for 6 months, we'll check in, we'll go for another 6 months, we'll check in. And it might be you get to one of those check-ins and you think, actually, you know, it's run its course, we've done what we wanted to, or there's a better way to do it, so we'll shut the network down. So I think finding a way to have those regular reviews, if data, you've got data there to be able to see where you're meeting purpose, and that helps as well. But absolutely, I think that evolution is key.
Is this the kind of refresh that Jocelyn was talking about?
I think so. So it's so we talk a lot about the scoping phase for network being the most important part, because if you get that purpose wrong, it's going to be really hard to get back on track. But possibly a close second is in how you regularly revisit that purpose, not in a we need to shut down type way, but just let's make sure we're on track. How do we know that we're doing what we're supposed to do?
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, this question reminds me of so Jan Panafex is part of our network faculty, and she leads the emergency care clinical network over in Victoria in Australia, and they run their networks for very kind of strict 9-month periods. But it doesn't mean that they don't come back to the same network maybe a year later if their clinicians want them to, because if that purpose is still there or that question is still there, then there's no reason that you can't come back and work on it again.
Oh, that's interesting. If any of you out there also run your networks in that sort of way, about having a very fixed time limit and then sort of offering the possibility of renewal, let us know. I think that's a really interesting approach.
Yeah, that kind of discrete time allowance is very interesting, because again, something Jocelyn said was about gauging the place in the life cycle of the network. How easy is it to do that?
So again, I'd go back to how do you build in regular review, as in give yourself the space to ask those questions. But, and jumping ahead to tomorrow's webinar, data, we're doing data tomorrow?
Data is Thursday.
Thursday. So Thursday's webinar is all about how you measure the success of the network. So if you have no metrics about whether you're meeting your purpose or you're fulfilling your aims as a network, I think it is actually quite hard to have that conversation about life course, because what are you talking about? You're saying, well, I think we're doing well, or I don't know. If you've got something to root that conversation in, which everyone shares and they sort of can accept those metrics as being the key ones, then I think it makes it far easier to have that conversation than if it's just sort of a bit nebulous.
Actually, that links nicely to one of our next questions in terms of how talking about networks worth. So Helen asks, networks take up resource. What happens when the members want something informal, but the organisers need something more to justify the resource?
Helen, that almost sounds like it's coming from a personal experience there. So, shall I start?
Well, yeah, if you've got any examples.
Well, I think that dynamic between leadership and management, for me, is key. That a network is there, particularly a learning network, is all about the membership. And so if the members have a particular view about what they want their network to be, if they want that more sort of informal gathering, if that's what they get value out of, then everything else should be swinging behind that. You shouldn't have someone else somewhere, someone somewhere else saying, no, but you're wrong. It's sort of, this isn't, in a market, the consumer is always right. In a network, well, the collective membership, more often than not, is going to be right, because that's what you're doing it for.
Absolutely. I mean, the networks are values driven and outcome driven. So, you know, if it's the values of the membership are that this is what they get the most benefit from, then that's great. But, you know, if you're sort of leading the network, so to speak, and you're looking at that outcome, then maybe it's how you look at how you measure that outcome to give something formal at the end of it. You know, maybe that's the conception that you have to change rather than go to the membership.
So the parallel I'd draw, Helen, it'd be really interesting to get your feedback, is going along to a conference primarily for the coffee breaks. So almost, I don't care about the PowerPoint, it's fine. But in the coffee breaks, I want to have a chat. If everyone is going along with that in mind, why on earth there isn't just, it's not quite endless coffee, but the activities aren't geared around that sort of informal come together? It's sort of a bit beyond me. So it's about being clear about purpose, and then everything else, all your infrastructure, all your activities, all your events, being there to deliver that purpose.
Great.
Questions, Anna?
Yeah, we have one from John. Thank you very much, John. So if the purpose of your network requires you to influence other people, how do you harness the power of many in an environment where people in power are often only used to listening to the equally powerful few? Good one. It's all very
these are webinar/therapy sessions. So yeah, it's sort of just asking for a friend, John, I'm sure.
Shall I start?
My thoughts are jumping about.
I've got an example.
Yes.
I mean, you're talking about the powerful. You know, on our European committee, we have a father organisation, which is the Federation for the Consultants in Europe, and when we or a mother, sorry, a parent organisation. Sorry, I stand corrected. And we found quite early on when we were jostling to create this network that actually there was a lot of resistance because they had their own echo chamber that told them what we wanted, and we actually as a group took ourselves away from that and looked at our purpose and what our membership wanted and what the residents wanted, and we created that, and it did burn the bridge originally, but actually once that value was noted, we could then go back into the fold with what we had and add value for everyone rather than keeping it just for ourselves.
Yeah, really nice example. And so I suppose two ways to think about it are in that sort of more adversarial way, I suppose, in terms of we are here to influence you over there. And then the other, and it sounds like you've had a bit of success there, is about how you do try and build those bridges. So the template we normally play with in the NHS is that you'll have a network which are sort of have local members and they try and influence national policy. Sort of a more interesting way might be to say national policymakers come and join our network. Actually, this is a shared endeavour, and if we think there's a role for you to play, actually, do you want to be part of that? I'm sure there'll be people on the other end saying, "Oh, I'm not sure," but it's one way to use the network.
I think it's the collaboration element, and when people see that working together works, then they want to be a part of that. So it doesn't matter how powerful they are in traditionalist. If they see that value, then they'll want to be a part of it.
Great. John, we hope you answered your question. Again, come back and say if not. I'm sure you would. How are we doing? Anna, we've got 6 minutes. Questions still coming through?
Yes. Do we have time for another question?
Certainly do.
Excellent. So I think touching on some of the points that we've discussed already, but David asks, do we know anything about what motivates people to join networks and what kinds of return they expect on their investment of time?
So
let's hit that one off.
Yeah, nice one, David. Thank you. Thanks for joining. Yeah. Shall I start?
Yes.
So I get, if you know me, I sporadically go on rants about language, and it's interesting that we talk about do we want to join a network, where often I think what the motivation is about there are other people doing things which I want to learn from, and I think we could do better together. And there's so Helen Buckley was written a really nice blog which I think went up on the Nuffield Trust website yesterday, talking about networks in sort of the most sort of broadest sense in terms of sort of personal networks and how you sort of build out from family. And rather than thinking about networks as a thing which you decide to join, how we think about that underlying purpose and motivation being around there is more we can do together than apart, and what is a structural way we can do that. And we'll all have been involved in sort of ad hoc collaborations where you go along, you might have a cup of tea and you agree, yes, we want to work on this together, and then nothing happens.
Yeah.
And I think what networks offers is sort of a more structured way to continue those conversations and actually see some benefit. And sort of from our work looking at some of the most effective learning networks anywhere, I think once you've, particularly when you're using data, you can really evidence the value of being part of that network. You're creating quite a strong pull factor, not only for people wanting to be naturally collaborative, but also wanting to know what they're missing out on. Actually, how are those guys generating such improvements?
I think that there's a fundamental sense of community as well that people want to feel around these things, and working with people like them who have the same problems, you know, and just identifying with that is really important as well. And we shouldn't discount that evolutionary human feel either.
So I think if you're thinking, I want a network and can't quite elucidate why or what purpose that network would have, I think you might be in a bit of bother. Being really clear about that as a thing which I would like to be different, and working collaboratively will help me achieve that thing, is probably a better.
But we shouldn't forget the people who don't like to be different. I think Suzette Woodward's written a fantastic blog for us on a letter to the introverts, and I highly recommend reading it. It's up on the website today, because there are some people who just want to be there and learning and not necessarily, you know, sort of want to engage, but will get a maximum benefit from listening.
Yeah, it's a nice counterpoint actually, and well worth reading that blog. It's one of my favourite blogs. Certainly of today, if not of a longer time period.
Speaking of, I'm just going to share that blog in the chat box, so you will have that there now.
Excellent. We have 2 minutes left. Anna, is there any last minute question, or should we do a wrap up?
No, I think it's time for a wrap up. Yeah.
Time for a wrap up. Excellent. Well, I wonder if we want to go around and just sort of think about sort of a single reflection, and to buy Anna and Danny time, I'll just do a bit of spiel to say thank you very much for joining. Please do join the rest of the webinars this week. At Kaleidoscope, our focus is about supporting highly effective learning networks. So if there's a network you're running, involved in, you think we could help, please do get in touch. Danny, reflection from today?
So for me, it's all about purpose, and it's about not being afraid to change that purpose if that's what the members of the network want. That's not a failure, that's actually a success if you can change that and improve engagement.
Great. Anna?
Yeah, following on from that point about failure, I think what Jocelyn said about if a network feels like it's not working, could it just be a slump, or does it signify the end of a network? It could be either, and kind of not panicking that everything is over just because some people seem a little bit disengaged.
Excellent. And I think for me, and it's going to sound like a plug for a future webinar, which it sort of is, that point about data, about yes, you need to have regular conversation about is the network working, are we delivering value? But if you don't have a way of actually being able to compare how you were doing 6 months ago compared to now, compared to where you want to get to, I think it's really, well, you make your job a lot harder to have that sort of conversation. And I think this is, for me, I think where some disengagement can come from, because people get unclear, they're uncertain, and it's hard to justify their time they're spending on a network where they don't really know what's come out of it. My very last point is we were having this sort of conversation with a fantastic group of hospital chief execs last week, and the prime risk one we came up with to a network's longevity is that it gets boring. And I think sort of ties with what Jocelyn says, but having a network which people want to be involved in, want to go along to the events, is certainly going to help. We will end it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining. This whole webinar is going to be up on the Kaleidoscope website before too long, and our 90-second summary will be tweeted out probably in about 20 minutes. So thank you again, and we hope to see you on future webinars this week. Thanks all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.